Let's say you're in the situation where you are the person in charge of equipment for the day. We can pretty easily categorize equipment into three types. Basically, functional or essential equipment for the activity, safety equipment or emergency equipment that you'll require on site for that activity, and also luxury equipment that you don't really need, but it does make it nice, and sometimes clients are expecting a certain level of luxury or comfort that simply makes the activity more enjoyable, and it doesn't take that much more effort to bring along. So functional equipment would be things like the rope if you're going rock climbing, or rock climbing shoes, and the harness. Now, technically, some people would say that's safety equipment, but for most situations, that's essential equipment that you're going to need to do if you're top roping at a location. However, safety equipment for rock climbing might be things like helmets. It would be an essential part of your risk assessment that you would make your clients wear helmets. So therefore, you need to have ropes and harnesses in order to do the climb, and you must have safety equipment like helmets on site and first aid kits on site, maybe an EPIRB on site, in order to run the activity safely. You could run it with just ropes and harnesses and sneakers. However, it's much safer to run it with all this required equipment and all this safety equipment. And often that safety equipment is a requirement for your organisation to run the activity, and that can be governed by whether you're going to be insured or not, or a requirement of your insurance that you have risk assessments done, emergency plans done, and all that safety equipment on site. So safety equipment is not optional, but it is not necessarily essential to run the activity. And that's often when sort of people doing activities privately can get themselves into trouble because they don't bother buying helmets, don't bother taking a first aid kit, because they can do the activity without it. However, it's not really safe to do so. And certainly as a commercial operator, you should not run it without their safety equipment. It is your choice, depending on the style of activity you're offering, whether or not you bring luxury equipment. So luxury equipment might be things like comfortable chairs to sit in. Some people are not happy sitting on rocks or the bare ground. They would like part of a luxury experience. They want the wilderness experience, but they don't want it so much that maybe things that might prickle them, or they don't want to go, I've got to sit on a rock. The rocks are uncomfortable. So you might bring foam mats, you might bring drop sheets for them to sit on or eat at, or even rugs or picnic rugs to lay food out for them. Nowadays it's not a luxury to have hand sanitizer, but sometimes it would have once been considered a luxury. Now, certainly in today's environment, is considered a requirement that you as a commercial operator, or a safety requirement that you as a commercial operator would bring things like hand sanitizer along with you. So although the types of food, whether you're providing food or not, or whether they're providing their own food, there is a risk with that, because depending on the activity you're running, do they bring the appropriate food? Is one muesli bar appropriate for a full day bushwalk? So you will find yourself in a situation, and we cover that in this course, that the type of food that you bring, one, for yourself, but two, for your clients. Because they're not always going to know what type of food is appropriate for the activity. Perhaps that's something you would like to include on the flyer you send out, the email you send out, or the correspondence you have with them, be it a meeting or a phone call before the activity. Something you're going to need to discuss with your supervising leader is the hazards and risks of the activity and how you're going to manage those. Not only how you're going to manage them on site, but also the types of paperwork you require to fill out and have written down and even with you before you leave the main area to go and run the activity. Something you'll need to confirm with the activity leader is the activity safety and emergency response procedures. This will often take the form of a risk assessment. Risk assessments take into account any hazards that might be nearby, and how these may impact a person when a person is on site, and what you need to do to alleviate that hazard. A hazard is a source or a situation with the potential to cause harm, whereas a risk is the chance of something happening with the potential for a negative effect or loss. For instance, a hazard would be a cliff edge. There's a risk of someone falling off that cliff edge. I guess the event is that you have people there near a cliff edge. How are you going to alleviate this problem? You might put in some procedures where people are not allowed within, say, 2 bodies lengths of the cliff edge without being attached to a rope. Another procedure you would have in place is that you have ropes there, and that if anyone's going to go within 2 body lengths of the cliff edge, they would be clipped into the rope. These are all things that you would cover well in advance in the briefing before you leave the car park, before you're anywhere near a cliff. These are things that you need to, safety procedures that you will need to have lined out to your clients before they get there. Now, the briefing at the start is so important. I can't emphasize that enough. Okay, that is a situation where you're giving people a heads up about what they're going to see, so anything beyond that point is a reminder that they've been told, and then you just need to remind them. And so during the briefing you may need to repeat it a number of times, particularly those things that are life and death situations or vitally important. It's important that you discuss these risky situations with the activity leader. You need to establish whose job it is to give the briefing, whose job it is to supervise them on site. It may well be your role to take care of all the paperwork before the activity has started, to have all the participants or clients' names listed down, that you or the medical officer is aware of their medical conditions, because some medical conditions may make certain situations more risky. If they suffer from epilepsy, is that a situation where they perhaps shouldn't be going scuba diving, and you'd need to discuss that with the instructor if they list that down on their medical form and they're not aware that that's a medical condition that stops them being able to do that activity.